Hello, this is Callas Software again, here in wonderful Berlin, nice weather outside, nice people inside. We are here for the second day of pdfToolbox 15 launch event. People are still coming in, so nice to have you here. Two sessions today. First one is what we call verticals. So some topics that are important, that are new in pdfToolbox, that are somehow related to verticals, mostly label and packaging. And the original plan was to also cover variable data in this session. It's not just label packaging, it also has to do with bleed, with page geometry boxes. So stuff in these areas, also barcodes will be covered. However, in this first session, we are pretty sure we will not make it for variable data. We just looked into this morning again, and then we decided that we will probably move the variable data part to the next session that comes thereafter, that has the title JavaScript Enhancements. So probably in the next hour, starting at 4, where the session title is JavaScript Enhancements, we will start with variable data. This session right now, label and packaging, is brought to you by David and myself. So I will start, then we will have David on stage, and then I will return. Important for everybody who hasn't already done so, you can download a pre-release of pdfToolbox 15 by following the URL that you can see here at the bottom of the slide, pdfToolbox15.callassoftware.com. And I believe David just entered an alternative URL into the chat pod. So either way, you will be led to the same page in the internet. That's it, I guess, for now. So let's begin with die lines. First feature. First feature is about how to create a die line. There is a file format that was developed, that was invented by some CAD, CAD software providers, and they agreed on a common file format for die lines. So quite often you would use 3D CAD software for creating die lines. And then there is a CF2 file format, which it's quite old, but it's still sometimes used. And now in pdfToolbox 15, it becomes possible to convert such CF2 files into PDF files. Yeah. pdfToolbox 15 understands the file format, which is not easy because it's not nicely specified. So you'd have to do some trial and error. We have done that, so you can, and I will show that in a minute, you can import such CF2 files into pdfToolbox. And then pdfToolbox also has some intelligence to recognize certain line types in CF2 formats and will then put them on processing steps layers accordingly. So for die lines, you would in CF2 use a certain line type, and then pdfToolbox will recognize it and uses some logic to then put them straight onto a processing steps layer. And just to remind you here at the bottom of the slide, you already have in pdfToolbox for a couple of versions the ability to convert from a die line in pdfToolbox to DXF, SVG, or to CF2. So these are the 3 most commonly used formats for die lines. So formats that a printing machine can actually use. So, but now let's try and let's have a look at what pdfToolbox can do. I have here some die line in CF2 format, Cupcake, and I can just drag it onto pdfToolbox 15. and then it is being converted and opened. So whenever you would submit a PDF file, usually a PDF file to pdfToolbox, you could just instead use a CF2 file and it will be on the fly converted to PDF. So you could as well, on command line, for instance, specify a profile that does something with a PDF file, and then instead of providing a PDF file, you can provide a CF2 file, and then it will be on the fly converted and right thereafter being processed according to what you have set up in the profile. Yes, and then, for instance, you could take that result here and use what I've just said. Go to switchboard, go to document, and extract that die line. I could show you that. Let's put that aside for now first. I could show you that a few of the lines here have been associated with processing steps metadata already. So here you can see there is a crease line that has been associated with structural creasing and a cut line that is associated with structural cutting. And that means I could also, of course, since these are layers, switch them on and off. And then there are some other line types that pdfToolbox didn't recognize. And these are the dimensions here. So it recognized them, it translated them. However, it didn't associate it with any processing steps layers. So again, so now let's go back. So what you can do is you can now export the die line. So you would, in the switchboard, specify the destination format. Let's use SVG here. You specify a check, and we're using a check that gets us all stroked line objects on a processing steps layer, on the processing steps layer for die lines, and a page geometry box for the SVG, so that the SVG format, that pdfToolbox knows where the SVG should start, and then I can execute it. To save it somewhere where we will be able to see it. Yeah. Files. We are in label. We have two results. Yeah, I did that before. Has now saved the result in here, and then I can double click and open the SVG, for instance, or in my default SVG application, which happens to be Safari here on my computer. And then I have the die line somehow converted from CF2 into SVG by means of pdfToolbox. That's that. Next one. Now that we have our die line for production, we may want to double check whether it's okay, whether we can work at it, whether our cutting machine will be able to deal with it. And then that obviously depends on the cutting machine that we're using. And there are several kinds of cutting machines. You use punches for packaging. Sometimes lasers are used, knives are used. So, and depending on the device that you have, you may have limitations in your application, in this machine. So for instance, for knives or a laser, you may have issues with very sharp angles or very narrow curves because the device can't deal with it. Or what we have heard. So in some cases, it's possible to deal with it, but then that requires manual work to cut it out manually then. So it would be good to double check about the quality of the die line that we have got. And that becomes possible too in pdfToolbox 15. So you can check for sharp angles, and you can check for small corner radiuses here. So you can see that at the top. So there is a new check, angle of stroke vector object, and then you can say is less than, and then you have to find out what value works for you. And you can do the same for small corner radiuses. And then now you may say, okay, but isn't that pretty much the same, a small corner radius or a sharp angle? It somehow is. For pdfToolbox, there's a difference. So as you can see here, an angle is really, you have two lines or straight objects that go into a point and then leave the point into another direction, so that you have an angle. And for the corner radius, it's a Bezier curve, so it's really a curve. And then each curve at some point has the smallest radius. So of course there is not a constant radius here, so it gets smaller, smaller, smaller until it is at the edge point and goes back. And this check determines the smallest radius. And since it is so that there's not usually what I have heard, not really a fixed value where you can say, so I have an issue if it's below this or that value. It's more the number of issues that I have on a page or on a path that creates a problem, or that interests me. There are also what you could call summary checks, so two checks that allow you to count the issues. So one counts issues on a path object, and the other counts issues on all path objects on a page. So let's see how that works. I have a demo file here. And I have a pdfToolbox 15 here. And this demo file has been derived from some real-world die line file. I've just extracted a few of the die lines from there and just give them some color so that it looks more nicely. And then I can use my check here. Just hit on analysis, and then it analyzes the PDF file. First, it comes up with questions. So it asks me for my thresholds, the thresholds that are used in my company. And I say, okay, the minimum angle that I want to have, or I want to have a hit for all paths where the minimum angle is below 10 degrees, or where the minimum curve radius is below 0.1 millimeter. And then now I have a couple of hits here. First, there is the angle of a corner is below 10 degrees. There are two instances. So this is the green one here. Yes, apparently the angle here at the top and the bottom is below 10 degrees. And also this black one here. And then the corner radius, as I've said, this is more curves. The violet one here has that issue. And again, the black one. So apparently this black one has two issues. And then there is the one that counts issues on objects. So apparently the violet one here has more than just one issue. Also the black one, and in total of my page I have more than 6 issues. And that is because one object may have more than just one issue. And then that allows me to determine whether the whole page can be printed, not just printed, it can be printed, but whether it can be properly cut or whether too much manual work is being involved. Yeah. Moving on, die line lengths. So if we have a die line, if we know we are going to cut it, it would be good to know how long that will take. So companies, service providers doing cutting are interested in to have some information, some indication how complex, how long it will take to actually cut the paper or whatever has been printed. They want to know basically the length of all the paths on a page. And that is also possible in pdfToolbox 15. There's a new property, length of a stroked vector object, and then you can give it a threshold, and then it will, in the trigger value, report to you how long that vector object actually is. And then you can total all of the vector objects on your page, and then you have the total length of what the cutter will have to do. Next one, still die lines, that is break the die line. Sometimes more in packaging than in label, you have an issue. You don't want the cutter to fully cut your die line. You want to have break points so that the cutted object still remains somehow connected to the outer parts of the printed sheet. So there is now a new fix-up that is called split die line at breakpoints. And what this thing does, how it is being configured, it uses two checks. One check specifies the objects that are used as breakpoints. And these breakpoints are being consumed by the fix-up. That means they are being replaced, they go away by the fix-up. And then the other check specifies the die line. And then probably that is really one that deserves demonstration. So we have don't need that result here. We have a nice label layout in this case, and we have, oh no, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to use Object Inspector, and I have here my die line, separation die line, and I have here a separation breakpoint, a spot color that uses the name breakpoint. And I have a pre-configured fix-up, split die line at breakpoints. And if we look at that, as I've said, it has two selections. One specifies the die line and the other specifies the breakpoint. And it's fairly simple, so let's just see what's behind. So behind we have a check. And this check finds me all objects that are spot color, okay, and where the spot color name is breakpoints. And the other is similar, so that is no surprise. And if we now, again, I'm using the test mode by means of the Alt key, clicking here, it creates a result, and we can also use the new looper feature in order to zoom in to it a bit, and then you can see the die line now has been opened here where the breakpoint was before, so we can compare to the original. This is the original where we still have the green breakpoints, and the result is gone away. We could even use the diff, and then it will indicate where there are differences on the page. So this seems to work. Fine, then we can move on. Next one maybe works the other way around. So once in a while you don't want to have breakpoints. You really want your lines to join each other. So let me introduce you to that feature. Here we have some packaging cut line looking nice on the left-hand side. So it's no issues, no visible issues. However, you can visualize that there are issues when you just ask pdfToolbox to use create and apply shapes and fill the whole thing. then you see what seems to be connected lines here actually isn't connected. So pdfToolbox had to somehow close open paths. Yeah, so when you ask pdfToolbox to fill, it can't fill a path that is not closed. So it just uses the shortest possible connection between the two open ends of the path, and that creates something really looking strange here, not what you would expect. And if your cutting machine requires passes to be connected, you will have a production problem. Yeah, so it would be somehow what you want to do is, in some cases, to derive a new path object from these disconnected path objects, a new path object where all the paths are connected. And that is possible in pdfToolbox 15 in the Create and Apply Shapes feature. What you had before was from vector paths, and I was using it to create this filled shape, which didn't properly work. There is a new possibility here in pdfToolbox 15, which is called from joined vector paths. And what that does is, if it finds an open path that is close to another path, it will connect to that path. So what it does with from vector paths, then it will use the same path object and just close it. Yeah? And in this case, it will not close the same vector path, it will try to connect it to another vector path that is closed. Yeah? And it will only do so if it's open. And if it's open and if such things are there, then it will internally create a copy, connect them, and will then use that copy for creating the shape. And that also is something visual, so we should have a look. Join die lines. Here I have a packaging, and I have again die lines, and you can already see in Object Inspector that these are not properly connected, the path objects, and I have here a few crease lines that appear to be green. And then what I can use, I can first use fill die line with from vector path. So I don't use our new feature. Again, in test mode, I'm filling it. And yeah, it creates another strange result here. Not actually that. So let's try a new thing. So we use fill joint die line, and then maybe I can also briefly show it. So here I have my new option from joint vector path, and can also use a test mode from here. And it does the same, but it now finds that there are paths that are close to each other. They overlap each other, the ends, but they are not connected. So it has now connected it, and it creates some more nice result here, a little nicer result. Yeah. A few words on that, because you need to know a little bit how it works. First, limitations, if you want, it only takes open paths into account. So if you have a path that is overlaps another path, but both are closed already, then it won't do anything with it. It will have, in such a case, so assume you have 3 path objects here that just join in one spot. It has to guess somehow what has to be connected and what not. Yeah, so in such cases, the result is not predictable. It's kind of undefined what comes out of it. And 2 things to take into account when you set up your own fix-up. You should limit it to stroke paths. So once in a while, you have lines that are actually fills. And pdfToolbox will allow you to select those objects and make them the basis of your shape creation. But you wouldn't usually get nice results out of this from joint vector paths. So you should limit it to stroked path objects. And you should make sure that you only select one path object. So in my example here, if I would have picked die line and crease line at the same time, the result would have been strange, because you can only fill one kind of object here. So you can, of course, use one after the other. So first you process the die lines and then you process the crease lines. If that would make sense. Usually it doesn't, but you should pick only those objects that you want to use. And that was my part so far. So I hand the whole thing over for David. To David. See you soon.
To me. Good afternoon. And yes, I did unmute myself. I'll start by saying that I'm very disappointed in Dietrich that he didn't want to change the color of the slides to match my shirt today, but can't be helped. I'm going to talk about some other features here, and we're going to start by something that is very visual, namely place text on path. And I already did some advertising for PDF Camp in the chat. Meanwhile, let me just say that this feature as well, is something that came up during one of the PDF camps. Actually, one of the people there, Damiano, made a very nice proof of concept with a bunch of technology that was available in pdfToolbox, but it was also quite complex to get it done, and it took a while. And so in pdfToolbox 15, there is a nicer way to get this done. It is implemented using a new fix-up, and you can see it there, place text on path. So this is one of the other place something fix-ups. There's a whole bunch of them by now. Of course, the most complex one is place content itself, which uses the HTML template. But here you just have to enter some information in there, and among the information, you have the distance between the path itself and the text that is going to be added to it. And then you have also the number of repetitions, which is quite important. And what that means is pdfToolbox is going to look at where this path begins and where it ends, and that gives it a distance or a length for that path. And then if you ask for 4 repetitions, for example, which is what was filled in here, then it is going to divide that path so that you have 4 versions of the same text equally distanced around the path. And you'll see that in the demo in a second, how that works. But that gives quite nice results. And then, of course, you also have to specify what the path object is, and you have ways to do that as well. In some cases, not always, but in some cases, one of the issues is that when you add text around the path, and imagine that this is a cut line, and this design already has bleed. So if you put text just outside the cut line, it might overlap with the bleed, or there might be other elements there. And so you can also create a white background. And that is the same, I believe, for example, when you say place barcode, you have that same option, but you have that option here as well. Okay, and I think that can now do a little demo, and I'm using Dietrich's computer, so I have to experiment a little bit. So that was very fast zooming. The file I am going to use is this one, and then you will see that it has a cut contour. There's actually multiple pages, and we'll see the result in a second. And then I also want the where is the what library was it? pdfToolbox 15.
It's favorites now, so you have.
But I changed that, I think. So that is not it. Probably this one. There we go. Place text on die line and varnish. There we go. Sorry about that. What I'm going to do is, since yesterday, I now also know that I can do option and then go into test mode immediately. So it's good to do these events. And then you have to wait until the text is added there. And as you can see, pdfToolbox has now, in this example, done this twice. So it looked for the cut contour and then it added text along the cut contour. There is also a white background that got added, as you can see. And then it did it a second time by looking for the varnish element and then also adding varnish around that. And what you can also see is that for varnish, there are 2 repetitions. For the cut contour, I have 4 repetitions. And they are nicely spaced out along the cut contour. Yeah? And that goes back to the settings that you have for this thing. So if I show you what the actual settings are. No, fix-ups, it changed order. I'm gonna have to get used to that now. When you look at the settings, then it says 5 points away from the path itself, and then number of repetitions is 4. So the text gets added 4 times around the path. And then that would be different for the second one that does the varnish. What is important to realize, of course, is that the result that you're going to get also depends on the path that you're adding. So if you do this for a shape that is really irregular, just to name one example, a penguin, then you might get text that overlaps with each other when it goes into sharp angles of this path. Yeah? So you have to make sure that this works for the use case that you have, but it's a very nice addition to the other place fix-ups that we have in pdfToolbox. Okay, next bit is about barcodes. And with barcodes, there are always more things that you can check, more properties that are important. And there were a few that pdfToolbox was not able to check yet. There were a whole bunch of things like symbology and a bunch of other things that were that you could put in a pre-flight profile if you wanted to, but there were some properties that were not there, and those have been added to pdfToolbox 15. Specifically, you can now get the rotation of a barcode or a matrix code, And that can be important. If you know that you are looking for an EAN code and it has to be 90 degrees rotated, then you can now check for that. But perhaps even more interesting, you can also check the quiet zone of a barcode. And there are just new conditions for that. I'll show them in a second. But I want to at least explain what the quiet zone is. So when you're reading barcodes, there is already, these things are very smart and they can read them very quickly. But in order for them to find the barcode, there usually is, for most symbologies anyway, there usually is a quiet zone. And that means that you have the barcode, the content of the barcode itself, and then you have an area that is empty, and then you have potentially other design. And this is a very good example. You have a QR code, or is it a data matrix? Not even sure, it's a QR code probably. And then you have a little bit of white space, and then you have the callas red that forms the rest of the design. And this quiet zone has to be big enough in order for things to work. Yeah? So you want to check that that quiet zone has the required size for a particular symbology. And so this would be good. This would be a case where it's not good, it comes too close to the resulting things. Whether you need a quiet zone or not depends on the symbology, I already said that. And where these quiet zones are also depends on the type of barcodes that you have. For linear barcodes like ISBN or EAN, you typically have a left and right hand side quiet zone, so two white areas on the left and the right hand side. For 2D barcodes like a data matrix or a QR code, quiet zone is all around the barcode typically. And it's measured in multiples of x, and this x is the width of the narrowest bar in the barcode, or the modulo of the barcode. And so for a QR code, for example, you need 4x. For an EAN code, you need 11 on the left-hand side and 4 on the right-hand side. So it really depends on the type of barcode you're working with. pdfToolbox allows you to check whether that quiet zone is sufficient. And so that is one possibility. And it also has a condition that returns the smallest size. And of course, this could also be interesting. And maybe you want to then pick that up in JavaScript and do something with it. But that could also be interesting. So let's have a look at how that works. And if I go to pdfToolbox and we pick up some other files here, I have one with an ISBN and I have one with a QR code. And I also have something called quiet zone has sufficient size. Okay, so here is my ISBN. This document has 2 pages, and you'll see that on page number 2, on the right-hand side of the ISBN code, I don't have a lot of space. On page 1, it is actually more. So when I run my reflight profile, it tells me that it found one problem. And of course, when we then look at that, the problem is on the second page, as was easy to predict. And then I could also look at the trigger values for this. And then it says the quiet zone does not have a sufficient size. And specifically, of course, for the EAN 13 symbology that we're using in this particular case. Okay, I could do the same thing for the QR code. Let's quickly do that. But of course, that does that has the same effect. It does the same thing. And here I also get one hit. And when I double click on it, you can see that it is also on the second page where in this case the QR code has been scaled up slightly, and so there is not enough white space around it. We go back to my ISBN, and then I can run the other example, smallest quiet zone size. And this gives me a result for page 1 and page 2. What this one does is simply return the values of the quiet zone. The smallest one in this case is 7, and you can see that it lists all of the quiet zones it's found for this particular barcode. So the left-hand side has 11x, and the right-hand side has 7x. Yeah? And this is the good one. When I would look at the one on page 2, you would see that they are smaller, which is why it was indicated as quiet zone is not big enough. So a new thing that you have in your toolbox, if you are literally, if you are working with barcodes, is the ability to check the quality of the quiet zone that you have around it, and whether a barcode has been rotated or not. Okay, and then we're swiftly going to the next one, which has to do with geometry boxes. Geometry boxes are media box, crawl box, trim box, bead box, art box. And specifically, what you very often want to do is you want to derive the trim box and the bleed box from marks you have in the document. And in pdfToolbox 14, you can already do that. Actually, that has been a feature of pdfToolbox for a long time. But there are certainly cases where you have limitations. You can't always, or you couldn't always say when and which page geometry boxes should be set. You couldn't limit or specify which area of the page was searched for. pdfToolbox had specific color spaces. It expected these marks to be, and you could not modify that. And one of the annoying things with software coming, other or new PDF generation software coming out, things like Canva, for example, one of the annoying things is that some of these PDF generators generate images instead of vector elements. And then that also makes it very difficult to find the marks and then set a correct trim box or bleed box. In pdfToolbox 15, you have a lot more possibilities or capabilities there, and different options, but I will go through this relatively quickly because I want to show how that works. So you can limit the search area, you can specify all kinds of different color spaces, and you can also have it work if I move aside a little bit. You can also make it work when the crop marks are part of an image. And that is really the most important bit. So let's take a look at how that works. And then I need once more a file for that. And I have that one here. This one has 4 pages. And I'll show you why in a second. And I want this one. And I'm actually going to open it up in edit, and then we'll say open up the fix-up. So here is the fix-up that you can now use. As you can see, there are a lot more properties than what we had before. And instead of just going over these, let me run it in test mode on this document, and then I will do one more thing, and I will ask test mode to show me the page geometry boxes. And then what you can see is that on page 1, it actually found the, well, it added a trim and a bleed box, so it found the marks. On page 2 and on page 3 and on page 4, it did not. Okay, that was by design. And so we can go back, and now we can see, I'll show you that it kind of had the minimum settings. It chooses all of the things that you perhaps would expect. Or trim marks, they can use registration color or spot color black or grayscale. That's already not very good, especially not for CMYK documents, but fine. What we can now do is tell pdfToolbox, you know what, you can look for any color space. Yeah? And then maybe we find something more. And so let me run tests again. And this is page 1. That was already okay. And now it also found page 2 in there. So there was a color space in there that was not one of the standard ones. And so now it is properly detected. Why is that? Well, before I show you the other thing in here, let me very quickly go to the object inspector. And then we can see that, oh, yes. So this is page 1, sorry. This is page 1, separation, registration color. So this is color all, set in an alternate device gray. So that is actually perfect. If I now do the same for page 2, you'll see that this is not separation all. It's actually just device CMYK, and it's not even black. It's cyan. So that was why it wasn't found the first time, but when we say any color space, then it finds it. So what is the problem with the last 2 pages? Well, the problem with the last 2 pages is the third page is a complete image page. There are no other elements. And the fourth page has all kinds of elements on it. This is live text and whatever. But if I look at the marks, then the marks are also part of an image. And this really is not something hypothetical. It happens quite often. And it really depends on how the PDF file was generated in the first place. So what I can do now is go back to my fix-up. And we're going to fix this by saying also look at images and then test. And so what pdfToolbox now does is when it finds marks that are vector elements, it will use those. But if it doesn't find any vector elements for marks, then it will look further and it will also look into images. So page 1 and page 2 were already correct. And now it also detected the marks on page 3 and on page 4. So where before it was much more limited when this fix-up would work, now you have something that works or that will work on a much wider range of documents. And then it's you again, Dietrich.
I'm David. So I just said, okay, I had answered some of the questions, hiding myself into David's live Storm account. Anyway, one more feature in this session, inner bleed. Inner bleed is at a desired condition. Let's find out. Oh no, 2 more. That is about inner bleed. We have an object here which hopefully looks familiar to you, and assume we want to produce it. We have a die line at the outer edge and at the inner edge. And then we need bleed. There isn't any bleed here. So we need it. We create it in pdfToolbox 14. We've got proper bleed at the outside, but we don't get proper bleed at the inside. And then if you want to cut it out, the C from callas, you have an issue. So you need to update to pdfToolbox 15, and there it becomes possible. So it now is also possible to create bleed toward the inner part. We didn't want to change it just under the hood. So you have options here, 2 more options. You had, so when you create shape, bleed at a shape, you need to specify how to create it, and then you have in 14 from tracing page content, either including or excluding white areas, and then you have two more options in pdfToolbox 15 that then add with inner borders, and that then you can guess what that does. If you don't use one of these predefined shapes here, or these predefined methods, you can also use your own custom shape definition, and then there you only have to make sure that you switch the checkbox reduce shape to outer borders off. If you switch it off, it will also create bleed towards the inner areas. That should be clear. And the last one is bleed offset. So what issue is that addressing? Once in a while you have objects that go far and very close to the trim box, but not really. They leave a little bit of white space inadvertently most of the time. And then if you use pdfToolbox to create, or any other tool to create bleed out of it, it will see that there is some distance, and if you use mirroring, it will just mirror the white edge, the small white area at the trim box. It will mirror at the trim box usually, and then it would be even twice as wide. What you can do to overcome it in pdfToolbox, you can specify an offset. So you could say, okay, just go 1/2 millimeter, a 1/10 of a millimeter inwards and mirror from there. The issue is, if you do that, you have to do it all the time. Yeah, so you don't know whether a PDF file has an issue. When you create bleed, you better go slightly inwards just to avoid this problem. In pdfToolbox 15, it becomes possible to automatically determine whether you need that cure. Yeah. So what you can do in pdfToolbox 15, you can render small stripes along of the trim box, and if pdfToolbox finds there indeed are objects quite close to the trim box, but not as at the trim box, then it will move the line where it mirrors to that edge of the object. Yeah, it will only do so for a part, of course, so it wouldn't go 5 centimeters inwards. It will only go roughly 1 millimeter for an A4 page. The distance actually depends on the dimensions of the page. And it uses the same algorithm to also determine whether there is already bleed in the bleed area that does not suffice. So assume you ask for 5 millimeters bleed and the customer provided a file where there already are 2 millimeters. Then pdfToolbox will detect it and mirror only where the 2 millimeters end. And the downside here, of course, for rendering, pdfToolbox needs a little more time. Yeah, and then what you should do is, of course, for the bleed generation and also for finding out whether there are objects, you could, for instance, limit it to only vector and images, but you could exclude text, which usually makes sense. So you wouldn't mirror at where text ends if the text goes close to the trim box. I think that makes sense. Anyway, we should have a look how that works. I need to here, and then we are bleed generation offsets, and then I have an example for inner bleed. Let's just switch to here. I need my favorites. And then I have generate bleed from page content except text. And then if I do that again using the test mode, then a generated bleed. I think we don't want to use the page geometry boxes here, but we want to use a loop feature. And then you can hopefully see that there is a thin white line here at the right edge of where the trim box was. And that is exactly the problem that I have just mentioned. Content goes close to the trim box, but not fully. And then if I'm deriving the mirror line from the original using this new option, then it creates properly where the page content actually ended. So now I don't have any white line here. I have a better bleed, or I have bleed that actually works. And same towards the outside here. I have an object here where there is some bleed. You can see the trim box, and you can see that there is some bleed, but not as much as I want to have. Again, we use first the one that doesn't do the trick here. And if you look, let's go back to the original. Here we see there is some text in the image which is redis, and in my result the S is gone. And then maybe indeed use the trim box here. So the redis is exactly at the trim box. So it has mirrored at the trim box, obviously, and it has cut all of that away. So a better result would be to determine that there was already a little bit of bleed, and as in this case, and now it has kept the redis and it has started to mirror where the image actually ended inside of the bleed zone. Better result, always nice. And how would you specify it? You will find in pdfToolbox 15 in the section where you specify where bleed should be generated. It was possible to offset the box here, but you can, instead of specifying a fixed value, just use these 4 checkboxes, and then the input fields are grayed out here.